"What must I do to marry you, human?" said the alien queen. I didn't know what to say. James Archer was used to pressure. As a human diplomat, he'd faced high-stakes negotiations, unspoken tensions, and endless hours of strategy in his career. But nothing could have prepared him for the royal banquet on Vurath, the homeworld of the Varathians. The planet was famous across the galaxy for its breathtaking beauty, towering spires, and the indomitable will of its people. It had taken years of delicate diplomacy to secure a seat at this table. He adjusted his collar nervously as he stood at the entrance of the Grand Hall. The banquet was to celebrate the potential peace treaty between the Varathian Empire and the Human Federation, a treaty that, if successful, could end years of tension between the two species. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Varathians, after all, were not like humans. Their culture was steeped in ancient traditions, fierce loyalty, and an almost otherworldly sense of honor. The Queen, Velena, was at the center of it all. Rumors swirled about her, a ruler both respected and feared, known for her wisdom and terrifying strength. There was no question in anyone's mind that she was the true force behind the empire. James had studied her extensively before the mission, but seeing her in person was an entirely different experience. Queen Velena stood at the head of the table, her presence dominating the room. She was taller than most humans, with glowing silver eyes that seemed to pierce through the facade of any individual. Her raven-black hair flowed down her back like a cascade of ink, and her posture was impeccable, an image of both regality and power. She wore an intricate, shimmering gown, a mix of alien design and the traditional garb of her people. James had seen her on screen, but now, in person, she felt almost mythical. There was something intimidating about the way she carried herself, an unspoken authority that commanded the room without a word. As James made his way across the room, he caught glimpses of other dignitaries, both human and alien, murmuring in hushed tones. Everyone was waiting for the Queen to speak, as though her words were the foundation of the very air they breathed. Finally, the time arrived. The lights dimmed slightly, and all eyes turned to Queen Velena as she rose from her seat. The room fell silent. James had expected a speech about the importance of peace, the future of their two peoples, and the need for cooperation. But what he didn't expect was what came next. The Queen's voice, clear and commanding, rang out across the hall. "What must I do to marry you, human?" Her words were simple, but the impact was immediate. James froze, his hand halfway to his glass. Every head in the room turned toward him, waiting for a response. The tension was thick. He could practically feel the weight of every Varathian eye on him. His heart pounded in his chest and his mind raced. Had he misheard? Was this some kind of bizarre cultural custom, or was the Queen making a very serious proposal? He swallowed, unsure of how to respond. He had spent months preparing for every possible diplomatic scenario, but this was not something any textbook could have predicted. James quickly glanced around the room, trying to read the faces of the Varathian officials, but their expressions were unreadable. Even the humans at the table were frozen in stunned silence. The Queen stood still, her expression unreadable, waiting for him to speak. Her eyes, silver and piercing, locked onto his as if daring him to say something, anything. James took a deep breath and straightened his posture. He cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "I don't know what you mean, Your Majesty." A small smile tugged at the corner of Velena's lips, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile of someone who knew exactly what she had just done. "I mean, human," she continued, "I seek your hand in marriage. You are the representative of your people, the one who stands for humanity. I wish to unite our worlds through marriage, not merely by treaties or negotiations, but by something far more binding." The words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. A marriage between the Queen of the Varathians and a human, could this really be happening? James felt a sense of unease creep up his spine. This was no ordinary proposal. Marriage between the monarchs of two species wasn't just about love or commitment. It was about power, alliances, and control. If the Queen's proposal was sincere, then the future of both worlds rested on his decision. But if this was a political maneuver, a power play to manipulate him and his people, he had to be careful. Varathian culture was rich with tradition, and what seemed like a simple request could carry far-reaching consequences. The room remained deathly quiet. Everyone was waiting for James to respond. He glanced at the Queen again, her serene face betraying nothing. "Why me?" he asked, unable to stop the question from slipping out. There are many diplomats from Earth who could speak for humanity. What is it about me specifically that you seek? Velena tilted her head slightly, as though considering his words carefully. It is not just your position, human, it is the way you carry yourself. You are different from others. You speak of peace, but there is fire in you. A fire that matches my own. I see potential in you, a strength that my people could learn from, and I believe that with you by my side, we could forge a new future for both our worlds. The words felt heavy. Velena wasn't just talking about politics. She was talking about something deeper, something far more personal. But was she serious? Was this about a true bond, or was she simply trying to solidify her reign through an alliance with humanity? James opened his mouth to speak again, but nothing came out. His thoughts were a swirl of confusion, doubt, and a growing sense of danger. He had never faced a situation like this before, where the line between personal and political was so blurred. He had prepared for everything, but not this, and the stakes were too high for him to make a rash decision. The Queen seemed to sense his hesitation. Her gaze softened slightly, though the air around them remained charged with intensity. "You do not have to decide now," she said, her voice gentle, almost coaxing. "But know this, human, I offer you more than a marriage. I offer you a future, a chance to shape the galaxy not just as a diplomat but as something greater. You have the power to change the course of history." As James stood there, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest, he couldn't help but wonder, what kind of future was he being asked to join? Was this truly a chance to help guide two worlds toward peace, or was it a dangerous game that he didn't yet understand? The room was still silent, and James felt the eyes of every person in that hall on him. But he knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. James Archer had never been so uncertain in his life. The grandeur of the royal palace, the strange alien atmosphere, and now the Queen's unexpected proposal left his mind in a whirlwind of confusion. The banquet had ended hours ago, but instead of retreating to his quarters, James found himself following the Queen's guards through the glittering halls of the palace. The corridors were lined with walls of shimmering crystal, reflecting light from hovering spheres that cast a soft glow over everything. James couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the place, though his mind was still focused on the conversation he had had with Queen Velena. How was he supposed to respond to such an unexpected offer? What kind of game was the Queen playing? And most importantly, was this a true proposal, or was it just another political move designed to tie humanity to the Varathian Empire? He was led into a grand chamber, the walls adorned with intricate tapestries and holographic displays of alien landscapes. The room was vast, and at its center stood a table crafted from what appeared to be a smooth, dark stone. Queen Velena sat at the head of the table, her posture regal as always. Her silver eyes gleamed with a mysterious intensity as she watched James approach. "Please, take a seat, human," she said, her voice calm but commanding. There was no hint of mockery in her tone, only a quiet invitation. James hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from her. He had been briefed on the Queen's remarkable ability to remain composed no matter the situation. But now, sitting in front of her, he could see there was something else there, something more than just political ambition. There was a deep loneliness in her eyes that made James wonder if her proposal came from a place of isolation. "I understand this is unexpected," Velena said, breaking the silence. "But it is not a question I ask lightly. The future of my people depends on finding a way to secure our survival. Our empire is in turmoil, and without allies, we face a dark future. You human have the power to change that." James opened his mouth, ready to protest, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Before you speak, understand this. I do not offer you this proposal simply because of politics. It is true that a union between us could unite our species in a way no treaty ever could. But there is more to it than that. I am not asking for a marriage of convenience alone. I am asking for a partner who can stand by my side, someone who understands the weight of leadership, the strength needed to guide an empire through its darkest days." James was taken aback. He had expected to hear more about political alliances and advantages, but the Queen's words now hinted at something far deeper. She was not asking for him to sign a treaty or sit at a negotiation table. She was asking for something personal, something that would bind him to her and to her people forever. "You must know," she continued, that our people are not like humans. Our bond is more than a simple exchange of words or vows. To marry a Varathian queen is to become part of the very fabric of our culture, of our future. It is a responsibility that few would understand, let alone embrace. James's heart raced. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of life this could mean for him. A life with the queen could grant him unimaginable power and influence, but it would also mean giving up his freedom, his autonomy. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like an invisible force. "You may choose to walk away," Velena said, her voice soft now. "But I must ask you to consider the stakes. If you do not agree to this union, our alliance with humanity could collapse. Our enemies are growing stronger, and without unity, neither of us will survive. I am offering you the chance to shape history, James Archer. A chance to change the fate of not just two worlds, but an entire galaxy." The silence stretched between them, and James could feel the gravity of the moment settling in. He had spent his entire career building peace, solving conflicts, and negotiating with alien civilizations. But this was a different kind of negotiation altogether. His mind raced, trying to calculate the consequences of every possible decision. "I'm not sure I understand," James said, his voice low. "Are you asking for a political marriage, or is this something else?" Velena leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. "It is both," she said. "What I seek is a union that goes beyond mere politics, a true bond, one that is forged not just for survival, but for the future, for hope. You have seen our people, how we struggle, how we fight to hold on to what we have. I am offering you the chance to help us rebuild, to give us strength, to stand with me not as a subject, but as an equal." James was silent for a long moment. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. He had seen the power in Velena's eyes, the quiet authority that commanded respect. But there was also a vulnerability there, a longing for something beyond power, beyond war and politics. Was this truly a proposal of love, or was it a desperate plea for survival? Was he just a pawn in a game that stretched far beyond his understanding? "I need time," he said finally, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "This is too much to decide in one night." Velena nodded, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need. But remember, every decision has consequences, and time is not on our side." As James stood to leave, he felt the weight of her words lingering in the air. The decision before him was unlike any he had ever faced. To marry Velena was not just to be with a queen. It was to become part of an empire, to become part of a struggle for survival. He had no illusions about the challenges they would face. The Varathians were fierce and proud, their history filled with warfare and conquest. But in that moment, he couldn't help but wonder if the Queen's words were sincere, if this was truly a chance to unite two worlds for a greater good, or if he was simply being swept into a conflict far larger than himself. The corridors seemed even darker as he walked back to his quarters. The palace was quiet now, the only sounds the soft hum of the lights above and the distant echoes of guards on patrol. James couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could never have predicted. The weight of the decision he would have to make hung heavy in his mind. Could he really turn his back on this opportunity? Could he live with the consequences of rejecting the Queen's offer? He didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was certain. The peace treaty, the alliance with Vuroth, and even the future of humanity itself, all of it rested on the decision he would have to make. And the clock was ticking. James lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow of the distant stars shining through his window. His mind was a whirlwind, filled with thoughts of the Queen's proposal. What had started as a diplomatic mission had quickly transformed into something far more complicated. The weight of her words pressed on him, and no matter how many times he turned them over in his mind, he couldn't seem to find clarity. The palace around him was silent, the soft hum of the air circulation the only noise. He had asked for time, but it seemed like the more time he had, the more confused he became. What was he really being asked to do? What was at stake here? He had never considered the idea of marrying an alien queen, let alone one as powerful and enigmatic as Velena. But now it seemed like the only choice that could change the future of humanity and the Varathian Empire. James sat up, rubbing his temples. The image of Queen Velena's silver eyes haunted him. He had seen her strength, her beauty, her undeniable power, but he had also seen the vulnerability that she had tried so hard to hide. She wasn't just a ruler, She was a person, someone burdened by the weight of her world's survival. She had made it clear that the union between them wasn't simply political, it was personal, a chance to forge something deeper. But was he ready for that? Could he become a part of her world, both as a partner and as a leader? The morning came far too quickly, and as the first rays of light broke through the horizon, James knew it was time to make a decision. He dressed slowly, running his hands through his hair, the decision gnawing at him. A part of him wanted to run, to reject the Queen's offer and return to Earth, where life was simpler and he could pretend that everything he had seen here was just a dream. But another part of him, one that he couldn't ignore, felt a pull toward her, toward the future she promised. He couldn't deny that there was something powerful about the connection they shared, something that went beyond political games. With a deep breath, he made his way to the Queen's private chambers. The guards didn't stop him. They had been informed of his arrival. As he approached the large doors, his heart began to race. He wasn't sure what he was walking into, but he knew that today would change everything. The Queen stood by a large window, her back to him. The soft glow of the early morning sun illuminated her figure, casting a warm light on her dark gown. She turned as she heard his footsteps, her expression unreadable. There was a moment of silence between them, and then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You've come to a decision, human?" she asked, her gaze never leaving his face. James hesitated, then nodded. "I have," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "I've thought about it a lot, and I realize that this isn't just a political decision. It's more than that. It's about the future of our people, and yours. I can't ignore the stakes anymore." Velena's silver eyes softened, though her expression remained serious. She gestured for him to sit. "Then tell me, what have you decided?" James took a deep breath and sat down across from her. He had known this moment would come, but facing it now felt like stepping into the unknown. His mind raced as he searched for the right words. "I think," he began, his voice faltering for a moment before he found his footing, "I think I can't walk away from this. The union you propose, it's not just about our two species. It's about more than that. The galaxy is changing, and if we don't act, it could be too late. I believe in the future you envision, Queen Velena. I believe in what we can accomplish together." Velena's eyes flickered with something that could have been hope, though it was quickly masked by her usual calm. She nodded slowly, her gaze intense. "You understand the gravity of your decision, human. If you choose this path, there is no turning back. Your life will change in ways you cannot imagine. You will become part of our world, my world, forever." James swallowed. He could feel the weight of her words, and the reality of what he was agreeing to began to settle in. This wasn't just a treaty. It wasn't just a simple alliance. If he married the Queen, he would be entwined with her people, her struggles, and her future. His life would no longer be his own. He would carry the responsibility of both human and Varathian futures on his shoulders. "I understand," James said quietly, "and I'm ready." Velena's gaze softened once more, and for the first time since they had met, she allowed herself to smile, a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Then we shall begin," she said, her voice steady. "The first step in our union is to understand each other's cultures, to see beyond the politics and the power. We will go to Varathian lands, to the heart of our civilization, where our bond can be sealed." James wasn't sure what she meant by sealed, but there was something in her tone that suggested this was just the beginning of a far deeper commitment than he had imagined. He nodded in agreement, though his mind was still racing. He had made his choice, but what came next? What did this new path hold for him? The Queen stood, her tall figure commanding the space around her. "The journey will not be easy," she said, her voice unwavering. "We face enemies who will not accept our union. There are forces in the galaxy who will do everything in their power to prevent this from happening. But together, we will rise above them. We must. The future depends on it." James stood as well, meeting her gaze. There was no turning back now. He had chosen to walk this path, and he would face whatever challenges came with it. The weight of his decision pressed on him, but he also felt something else. A sense of resolve, a feeling that perhaps this was the right path after all. "I'm ready," he repeated, his voice more certain now. "I'll stand with you, Velena. We'll face whatever comes together." The Queen's eyes softened just a little, and for the briefest moment, James saw the person behind the crown, the woman who was as determined and strong as she was vulnerable. The realization hit him hard. She wasn't just a queen, she was a leader, someone who carried the hopes and dreams of an entire people. And now he was part of that dream. "You are not just my partner, human," Velena said, her voice low but full of conviction. "You are my equal in this. Together we will rebuild what has been broken, and we will do it as one." James nodded, the weight of the moment sinking in. The decision had been made. There was no going back. But as he stood there, side by side with the Varathian queen, he couldn't help but wonder what the future truly held. He had stepped into something far larger than himself, something that would change not only his life but the fate of two worlds. And though he didn't know exactly what would happen next, one thing was certain. His life had just become intertwined with the future of an entire empire. The journey had only just begun. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. James had not expected the intensity of what it would take to get ready for a journey to the heart of the Varathian Empire. The Queen's palace had become a flurry of activity, with Varathian guards and officials moving about, making sure everything was in place for the upcoming trip. The whole experience felt like stepping into a different world, one that was as ancient as it was advanced. James had been briefed on everything from Varathian history to the complex protocols surrounding their royal family. Yet, no amount of studying could prepare him for what was to come. He had agreed to marry Queen Velena, yes, but he had no idea what that truly meant in practice. What did it mean to be a partner to someone like her? To walk beside a ruler who was not just powerful but burdened with the weight of an entire empire's survival? The queen had explained that their journey would take them to Varoth's ancient capital, a place known as Velithar, the seat of power for the Varathian people. It was a city carved into the side of a massive mountain, its streets winding like the veins of the world itself. Velithar was not just the political capital, but also the heart of Varathian culture. The queen had told James that this was where the final step of their union would take place, where their bond would be tested, strengthened, and made permanent. For James, it was both thrilling and terrifying. He had spent his life learning the art of diplomacy, but this was something beyond anything he had prepared for. As he sat in the Queen's private chambers, looking out at the sprawling city below, he felt a mix of excitement and dread. The decision he had made was irrevocable, and now there was no turning back. Velena entered the room quietly, as always. She was dressed in her royal attire, her dark hair flowing freely behind her. James had come to appreciate the way she carried herself, the quiet strength that radiated from her every movement. Even in the face of uncertainty, she remained poised, unshaken. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice soft yet full of expectation. James turned to face her, his heart beating faster. "I think so," he replied. "I've never been more sure of anything, but I'm still unsure of what happens next." Velena smiled, though it was tinged with something deeper, something that spoke of shared understanding. "You are not alone in your uncertainty," she said. "This is as new to me as it is to you, but we must face it together. That is the first step of our union." The Queen's words brought a sense of comfort, and for a moment, James allowed himself to believe that he wasn't walking into the unknown alone. Together, they would face whatever came next. The journey to Velithar was unlike anything James had ever experienced. They traveled in a sleek Varathian airship, designed to be both a vessel of luxury and a symbol of their people's advanced technology. The airship was enormous, with windows that offered a stunning view of the landscape below. For hours, they soared above mountains, oceans, and forests, heading toward the capital, where the future of both their worlds awaited. As they flew, Velena shared stories of her people, stories that went beyond the usual political rhetoric. She spoke of her childhood, of growing up in the shadow of her father, the former king. She spoke of the responsibilities that had been thrust upon her from a young age and of the loneliness she often felt, trapped by her position as ruler. James listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. The more he learned about her, the more he realized that the Queen was not just a figurehead. She was a leader who had sacrificed much for her people. Her strength was born not only of her position, but of the burdens she carried. As the airship descended toward Velithar, the landscape before them was breathtaking. The city sprawled across the side of the mountain, its buildings carved directly into the rock, with bridges connecting different levels of the city like veins in a living organism. It was a city of ancient beauty, its design a fusion of nature and architecture. The ship touched down at the royal landing platform, and James was escorted out by a group of Varathian soldiers. The streets of Velithar were alive with activity, people moving quickly, exchanging goods, and greeting one another with a quiet but evident sense of purpose. This was a city that didn't just survive, it thrived, a living testament to the resilience of the Varathian people. They made their way through the city, with Velena leading the way. She walked with the confidence of someone who knew her role in the world, but there was a softness in her expression that only James could see. As they approached the palace, James felt a wave of nervous energy flood through him. The palace was even grander than he had imagined, its towering spires stretching high into the sky. The architecture was both intimidating and awe-inspiring, a symbol of the power and history of the Varathian Empire. Inside the palace, they were greeted by a group of high-ranking officials, each one bowing to Velena as she passed. There was an air of respect that followed her, but also a sense of distance. James couldn't help but notice that the people who served her were not just loyal, they were in awe of her. And as he stood by her side, he felt something new. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was part of her world now. Velena led him to a large chamber, where a grand table was set up. The walls of the room were adorned with intricate carvings of Varathian history, battles fought, empires built, and the rise and fall of rulers who had come before. As they entered, Velena's guards remained at the door, leaving James and the queen alone in the room. She turned to face him, her expression serious. "This is where our union will be sealed, James. Here in the heart of Varath, where our people have lived, loved, and fought for centuries." James nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had agreed to this, yes, but now that he was here, surrounded by the rich history of the Varathian Empire, it felt even more significant. The bond they were about to form wasn't just about love. It was about survival, about securing a future for two worlds that had been on the brink of war for far too long. Velena stepped closer to him, her silver eyes searching his face for any trace of doubt. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Once we do this, there is no turning back. You will be part of Varath forever. Our people will expect it. You will be expected to lead alongside me, not as a partner, but as someone who shares the weight of this empire." James looked at her, and for the first time he saw beyond the queen. He saw a person who had fought for everything she had, someone who wasn't asking for help but offering a future. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized the gravity of what he was about to do. "I'm sure," he said, his voice steady. "I may not fully understand everything this means, but I believe in us. I believe in what we can do together." Velena's eyes softened, and for a moment the tension between them seemed to dissipate. She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "Then it is time," she said. The ceremony was simple, but its significance was undeniable. There were no extravagant rituals, no grand declarations. Instead, it was a quiet, intimate moment between two people who were about to change the future of their worlds. As they stood before the table, Velena took his hand, and for the first time, James felt the full weight of her commitment, not just to her people, but to him. This was real, this was happening, and as the ceremony concluded, the room was silent, save for the soft sound of their breathing. James knew that from this moment on, there was no going back. He had made his choice, and in doing so, had bound his future to the Varathian Empire and to the woman who would be both his partner and his queen. The days after the ceremony passed in a blur. James had expected his life to change, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of what it meant to be married to Velena, the queen of the Varathian Empire. Everything had shifted. The city of Velithar, the palace, the people, it was all so different from anything he had known before. Yet, as overwhelming as it was, there was a quiet certainty that had settled within him. He had made the right decision. This was his future now, intertwined with the Varathian people and the queen he had come to respect more deeply with each passing day. Velena's leadership had been tested immediately after their union was sealed. There were murmurs among her court, some supportive, others not so much. She had always been a strong queen, but now, with a human by her side, many wondered what it would mean for the empire. James had heard the whispers, the cautious words behind closed doors, but he refused to let them unsettle him. This was not the time for doubt. It was a time for action. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose, one that had been missing for so long. Together, James and Velena worked tirelessly to strengthen their alliance. They spent long hours in the palace, meeting with ambassadors, strategizing, and preparing for the challenges ahead. The threats against the Empire had not disappeared. There were still forces in the galaxy that sought to exploit the Varathians' vulnerability, still factions that believed peace with humanity was a weakness. But with each passing day, James felt more connected to the Queen and her world. He wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was a partner, someone who stood beside Velena, not as an outsider, but as someone who was beginning to understand the intricacies of her people's struggles. One afternoon, as they sat together in a small, private garden in the palace, Velena turned to him, her face serious. "The time has come," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "We cannot wait any longer. The galaxy is changing, and we need to act before it's too late." James listened carefully. He had always known that their union was more than just about peace. It was about securing a future for both humans and Varathians. But now the true test had arrived. There was an external threat, one that they could no longer ignore. The Harkin Empire, a fierce and expansionist civilization, had been eyeing the Varathian territories for years. The alliance with humanity had given them hope, but it was only the beginning. Now they had to prove that this union was more than just a political gesture. "What are you asking?" James said, his voice calm but his heart racing. He had been prepared for a lot, but this was different. This was the reality of their situation, the very reason they had come together. "We must strike first," Velena said. "We cannot afford to wait any longer. The Harkins will attack soon, and if we are not ready, we will be overrun. We must show them that we are not weak, that we are united." James nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of what she was proposing. A preemptive strike. It wasn't a decision they could take lightly. There would be consequences, both for the Varathian Empire and for humanity. But James knew that sometimes you had no choice but to act. This wasn't just about defense, it was about survival. "I trust you," James said. "I trust in what we can do together." "We will make this work." Velena's silver eyes met his, and for a moment they were silent, as if understanding the enormity of the decision they had made. Then she nodded, her expression resolute. "We will move forward together." The days that followed were filled with intense preparations. James was right by Velena's side, helping her coordinate with the Varathian military and the human forces who had pledged their support. It was a delicate balance. Humanity and Varoth both had their own ways of fighting, their own strategies and strengths. But together, they could create something far stronger than either side alone. Velena was a natural leader. Her confidence in battle was undeniable. She had been trained from a young age to lead her people in war, and now, with James by her side, she seemed even more unstoppable. He marveled at her strength, not just in battle, but in the way she held the empire together through the most challenging moments. She wasn't just the queen of an empire, she was a woman who bore the weight of her people's hopes and fears on her shoulders. For his part, James found himself adapting to the role he had never imagined for himself. He wasn't just a bystander. He was an active participant in this fight. He spoke to the human soldiers, helping them understand the Varathian tactics and how they could combine their strengths. He spent hours with military strategists, refining their plans and making sure everything was in place for the impending battle. The night before the attack, James stood outside the palace, looking up at the stars. The city of Velithar stretched out before him, its lights twinkling in the darkness. He couldn't help but think about how much had changed since he first set foot on Varoth. His life had taken a turn he never expected, and now, as he stood on the brink of war, he couldn't help but wonder what would come next. He felt a presence beside him. It was Velena, her silhouette outlined by the soft glow of the palace lights. "You're thinking about the future, aren't you?" she asked softly, her voice steady. James turned to her, his heart heavy. "I am. There's so much at stake. Tomorrow we'll fight for everything, for our people, for our future. And I—" "You will not fight alone," she interrupted gently, placing a hand on his arm. "You are part of this now, James. This is our battle, ours together." James smiled, a sense of peace settling over him. He had made the right choice. There was no turning back, and yet in that moment he realized that he wasn't afraid. He had Velena by his side, and together they were unstoppable. The battle was fierce, unlike anything James had ever experienced. The Harkin forces were powerful, and their fleets were massive, but the combined might of the human and Varathian forces was something the galaxy had never seen before. They fought side by side, a unity forged in the fires of war, and with each passing hour they pushed the enemy back. James fought with everything he had. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for the future of two worlds. The battle raged on, the sound of blaster fire and explosions filling the air. And in the midst of it all, James found himself standing next to Velena, leading their forces with unshakable resolve. As the final strike was delivered, the Harkin fleet fell back. They had been defeated, but not without cost. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The galaxy was a vast, unpredictable place, and new threats would always arise. But in that moment, as he stood beside the Queen of Vuroth, James knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The victory was theirs, and the bond they shared, both personal and political, had proven to be the strongest weapon they had. Together, Velena whispered, her silver eyes locking with his. "We've done it. We've secured a future." James nodded, his heart swelling with pride in something deeper, a connection that went beyond the battlefield, beyond the war. It was a bond that would last forever. As they looked out at the stars, James knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they had just begun to change the future of two worlds, and no matter what came next, they would face it together.